The cabin of Flight 827 thrummed with the low growl of engines, a metallic beast slicing through the sky at 30,000 feet. The air inside was stale, tinged with the faint musk of recycled oxygen and the sharp tang of coffee from the galley. Passengers shifted in their seats, a restless mosaic of lives bound for DC, their murmurs weaving a quiet tapestry beneath the hum. In row 14, by the window, sat Jalen Patel, a 16-year-old black boy with a lean frame and eyes that carried a quiet storm. His hair was cropped short, a fade that framed a face still softening from childhood, though his jaw hinted at the man he'd become. He wore a black hoodie, the hood pulled down, and earbuds dangled from his neck, the faint pulse of hip-hop leaking into the air. His backpack rested at his feet, a scuffed relic of high school halls, but its contents held more than textbooks, a Glock 19 unloaded tucked into a hidden compartment, a gift from his father, Kash Patel, the newly minted FBI director. Across the aisle, the tension began to coil. Maria Delgado, a 45-year-old Mexican woman with a wiry frame and a face carved by years of hard-earned defiance, strode down the aisle with the swagger of someone who'd fought for every inch of her world. Her dark hair was pulled into a tight bun streaked with gray, and her eyes burned with a restless fire. She wore a faded denim jacket over a red blouse, her jeans frayed at the knees, and her hands gripped a boarding pass that read 14B, the seat beside Jalen, but her gaze locked on 14A, the window seat, with a hunger that bordered on obsession. Maria was no stranger to claiming what she wanted. Years of scraping by in Tijuana, then clawing her way into a smuggling ring stateside, had taught her that power was taken, not given. She'd built a small empire moving contraband across borders, her name whispered in the shadows of El Paso and Nogales. The window seat wasn't just preference, it was a throne, a perch to survey her domain, and she wasn't about to let some kid have it. Maria paused at the row, her eyes raking over Jalen with a flicker of disdain. "That's my seat," she said, her voice low and rough, laced with an accent that carried the weight of dusty streets and border towns. Jalen glanced up, his expression calm, almost bored, as he pulled one earbud free. "Ticket says 14B, he replied, his tone smooth, revealing nothing as he tapped the armrest between them. Maria's lips twitched, irritation sparking as she waved her boarding pass like a weapon. "I don't care what it says. I want the window." The words hung heavy. A challenge wrapped in grit, and the air thickened with the scent of a brewing storm. The exchange could have fizzled there, a petty squabble lost in the drone of the flight. But Maria pressed, her voice rising like a gust over the desert, cutting through the cabin's hum. "Get kid," she snapped, her hands slamming the armrest with a crack that jolted the seat. Jalen's pulse quickened, not from fear but from the thrill of the dance. He'd grown up in the shadow of power, his father's rise from prosecutor to FBI director, a masterclass in control. Kash had drilled into him, never flinch, never fold. This woman was a mosquito buzzing in his ear, but the cabin was stirring now, a ripple of tension threading through the rows. A man in 15C pulled out his phone, the camera's red light winking as he angled it toward them. A woman across the aisle whispered to her companion, her eyes wide with hunger for the drama. Jalen felt the weight of their stares, a spotlight he hadn't sought, and something in him shifted. A flicker of steel, a choice to end this before it spiraled. Maria leaned closer, her breath hot with rage, her face a mask of entitlement. "You think you're somebody? I've dealt with bigger than you, pendejo." The slur landed like a slap, and the cabin gasped, a collective breath that sucked the air dry. Jalen's hand moved to his backpack slow and deliberate, as Maria's tirade crested. "Move, or I'll drag you out myself," she barked, her fingers curling into fists. And then, the reveal. Jalen drew a leather wallet from his hoodie pocket with a grace that bordered on defiance, flipping it open to reveal an ID, FBI credentials, his name stark against the seal, Jalen Patel, Junior Liaison. "FBI," he said, his voice a quiet thunder that rolled through the cabin. "And my dad's Kash Patel, you might want to rethink this." Maria's words choked mid-sentence, her body stiffening as if struck by a gust of icy wind. The color drained from her face, leaving her lips a stark slash against her pallor. The passengers gasped again, louder now, a wave of shock that seemed to shake the plane. Jalen's lips curved faintly. Not a smile, but a shadow of one, as he added, "Sit down or this flight's your last ride stateside." The aftermath unfurled in chaotic, delicious waves, a burn of consequences that rippled through the plane like a wildfire. The flight attendant, Clara, a wiry woman with a nervous tic, rushed forward, their voice trembling as she addressed Maria. "Ma'am, please, let's get you settled." Maria stumbled back, her bravado crumbling like sand, her eyes darting as if seeking an escape that didn't exist. The crew guided her to 17D 3 rows back, where she collapsed into the seat, her hands shaking like leaves in a storm. The passengers watched, their whispers a gritty hum of awe and unease, some rooting for Jalen, some wary of the kid who'd just dropped a bombshell. Jalen slipped his ID back into his pocket, his movements fluid, his earbuds sliding back into place with a practiced ease. He gazed out the window, the clouds a soft blur against the endless sky, but his mind churned. Maria's outburst had been a flare in the dark, drawing eyes he didn't need. The Glock in his bag felt heavier now, a secret that pulsed with danger. He'd flashed his creds, not from pride but necessity. And the cost lingered, a crack in the armor his father had forged for him. Ascending the sky. The story didn't ignite here, not in this charged clash mid-flight. It began hours earlier, in the humid sprawl of Los Angeles International Airport, where the air hung thick with jet fuel and the restless pulse of travelers. Jalen moved through the terminal like a shadow through dust, his steps quick, his presence a quiet ripple. At 16, he carried his father's legacy in the set of his shoulders, his skin a deep brown that soaked up the light as he adjusted his backpack. His hoodie clung to him with a casual defiance, his sneakers scuffing the tile with every step. To the casual eye, he was just another teen, but beneath the surface, he was a Patel sharp, trained, and unyielding. Jalen's mission was straightforward. Board Flight 8027 to DC, rendezvous with his father's aide, and slip back into the rhythm of his double life. High school by day, FBI shadow by night. The Glock, a birthday gift from Cash, was stashed in his bag, a silent promise of the world he'd been born into. He'd spent months training, sparring with ex-Marines, decoding encrypted files, trailing suspects through DC's backstreets. His father's voice echoed in his head. "You're my eyes, Jalen, don't blink." Passion drove him, for the badge, for the rush, for the lives he'd one day shield. But chaos? That was a beast he'd learned to wrestle. A shadow he couldn't always paint. The terminal buzzed with life, as Jalen cut through the crowd, his senses sharp to every flicker. A woman in a red scarf lingered too long by the gate, her eyes darting toward him before she turned away. A guy in a Lakers cap adjusted his duffel, his posture too stiff. Paranoia was a reflex, a beat in his chest he'd honed since Cash took the director's chair. He popped his earbuds in, letting Kendrick Lamar's bars drown the noise, and kept his stride steady. The gate loomed ahead, a finish line in the chaos, and he exhaled as he scanned his ticket, the beep a small anchor before the plunge. He boarded early, claiming 14A by the window, his body sinking into the leather with a soft thud. The plane smelled of stale air and faint cologne, a sensory knot that grounded him as he plugged in his earbuds. He craved the window control, a view, a slice of the world he could hold at arm's length. His fingers brushed the Glock's case in his bag, a ritual of reassurance, before he leaned back, letting the hum of boarding passengers roll over him like static. The cabin filled slow, a parade of lives brushing his orbit. A college kid in a wrinkled tee muttered into his phone, claiming 12C. A couple in matching Patagonia vests giggled their way to 16F and G, hands tangled, blind to the world beyond their glow. Jalen clocked them all through half-shut eyes, posture, glances, the heft of their bags. Instinct, not suspicion, drove him now, a rhythm carved into him from years under Cash's wing. He'd been 12 when his dad first sat him down, a Glock on the table between them. "You're not just my son," Cash had said, his voice rough as gravel. "You're my legacy. Act like it." Then came Maria Delgado, sweeping down the aisle like a dust storm off the border. At 45, she wore her scars like medals, her denim jacket patched, her red blouse aflare against the dim lights. She was a smuggler, a queen of the gray zones, her name a ghost in DEA files. She'd crossed borders with everything from cash to kilos, her hands steady, her will iron. Her ticket read 14B, but her eyes locked on 14A with a glint that promised trouble. She always took the window, her turf, her rules, and she wasn't about to bend for some kid. The clash kicked off soft, a spark in dry grass, but Maria fanned it fast. "You're in my seat," she growled, her voice a blade. Jalen didn't flinch, his gaze sliding up to meet hers with a lazy calm. "Check your ticket," he said, smooth as asphalt. Maria's lip curled, a spark flaring as she waved her pass. "I don't need to check shit, I want the window." The words landed hard, and the air tightened, a fist closing slow. She didn't back off. "Get up," she snapped, her palm cracking the armrest. Jalen felt the thrill hit, a jolt he knew too well. His dad's drills, the late-night stakeouts, the weight of the badge. This was nothing. But Maria pressed in, her breath sharp, her words venom. "You don't know who I am, kid. I don't sit middle." The cabin woke up, phones flashing, eyes hungry. Jalen's hand moved, slow, sure, and the ID flipped out, the FBI seal glinting like a warning shot. "The FBI," he said, low and lethal. "Kash Patel's my dad." "Sit down." Maria froze, her fire snuffed, her face paling like she'd seen a ghost. The cabin erupted, gasps, whispers, a live wire snapping. Jalen held her stare, his voice dropping. "Last chance." Chaos broke loose. Clara darted in, her hands fluttering as she steered Maria back to 17D. The woman sank into the seat, her empire dust, her eyes wild. Passengers buzzed, a mix of cheers and side eyes, all hooked on the kid who'd flipped the script. Jalen tuned it out, earbuds in, gaze on the clouds, but the Glock weighed heavy now, and the spotlight burned. He'd played his card, and the game had shifted. Back in LA, hours before takeoff, Jalen had met his dad's courier in a dive bar off Sepulveda, the kind of joint where the jukebox coughed and the stools creaked. Rico, a lanky ex-con with a neck tat, slid a burner phone across the table. "Kash says keep it close," he muttered. Eyes flicking to the door. "DC's hot." Jalen nodded, pocketing the phone, his fingers grazing the Glock as he zipped his bag. Trust was thin, but Rico was solid. 2 drops, no leaks. Still, Jalen swept the booth after he left, prying a bug from the salt shaker, crushing it under his heel. Kash's world didn't sleep, and neither did he. The phone wasn't just a lifeline, it was a leash. Kash had enemies, cartels, senators, ghosts from his prosecutor days, and Jalen was his edge, a kid with a badge and a game. The mission was simple: get to DC, link with Kash's aide, fade out, but Maria's stunt had lit a fuse, and Jalen felt it ticking. In 15C, a wiry guy, Ethan, a vulture with a phone, grinned as his clip hit ex-FBI kid owned smuggler on Flight 87. Comments exploded. Fire emojis. Deport her chance. A digital mob. Ethan didn't care who Jalen was, just that he'd gone viral. Jalen sensed it, the hum of eyes, and flipped open a dog-eared copy of The Art of War. Cover not comfort. His pulse steadied, but his mind raced. C drop. Kash's play. The fallout. Were stewed in 17D, her nails biting her palms. She'd misread Jalen, pegged him soft, and the sting cut deep. Her phone burned in her pocket. Call her, dig up this kid, hit back. But she held off, plotting. She'd risen from border dust to border boss, her will a blade. Losing to a team, that was war. The plane hit turbulence, a jolt that rattled trays and nerves. Jalen gripped his book. Eyes on the churning clouds, a memory flashing. Kash, blood on his tie, barking orders after a bust went south. "You don't break, Jalen. You bend." The Glock was his anchor, a piece of that night, and he wouldn't drop it now. Hours later, the plane touched down in DC, the tarmac slick with rain, the air sharp with jet fuel. Jalen stood, bag slung, the Glock a silent weight. Passengers parted, their stares a mix of respect and fear, but he felt the heat. Maria's glare, the viral clip, Kash's shadow. He slipped into the terminal, eyes scanning a woman in a trench coat. Grace, Kash's aide, nodded by baggage claim. The phone swapped hands, a quick brush, and she melted into the crowd. Jalen exhaled, the knot in his chest loosening, but the buzz lingered. His face was out there, tied to FBI, a thread Cash would hate. He stepped into the night, DC's pulse a familiar beat, but chaos loomed. Maria, the clip, the game he'd been born to play. The Cash got the call before Jalen hit the curb. Grace, clipped and cool. Drops clean, kid's a star now though. Cash, in his corner office, the Potomac glinting through the blinds, didn't flinch. He'd seen the clip, Jalen's ID flash, Maria's collapse, the ex-storm his son had held. But the smuggler? She was a loose end. Maria didn't wait. By baggage claim, she dialed her second, Luis, her voice a hiss. Find him, Jalen Patel. FBI brat. I want dirt. She hung up her smile a razor. She'd lost the seat, but not the war. Cash's move was coming. She felt it. 2 days later, it hit. Cash, tie loose, signed the order. Maria Delgado, deportable prior stacked from El Paso to Juarez. ICE scooped her at a diner off I-95, her coffee still steaming as cuffs clicked. She spat, cursed Jalen's name. But the plane to Tijuana didn't care. Cash watched the report roll in, his jaw tight. Good work, kid, he texted Jalen, the words cold but proud. Jalen read it in his dorm. The Glock stashed, the clip still trending. Passion had won, but chaos trailed close. Maria's crew, Cash's foes, the badges wait. He grinned, faint and sharp. The game was on.